A math prodigy attempts to unlock the secrets of the universe and the stock market. Listen as we chat about Jewdar, literal bugs in the software, and cavemen with holes in their heads. Then we find out if 1998's Pi stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and joining me as always is my buddy and pal and the guy who makes this whole thing happen, the director of the podcast, Alan Noah. How you doing, Al? I like to call you Al.
To quote Paul Simon, you can call me Al. I am doing very well. It's Pi Day. I mean, not right now, but when the episode comes out. Doing Pi, the movie for Pi Day, is one of those things that I think is really clever, I think is hilarious, and probably you and most people in the world would shrug and say, yeah, so what? And I'm like, ha ha ha, get it? Pie!
No, I always liked Pi Day. I thought it was kind of cute.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty good in math. I was good in math pretty much through high school. AP Calculus was where I started going downhill, and I took one calculus class at Cornell freshman year and had my ass handed to me. I was like, oh, I am not as good in math as I thought. Are you like a math nerd?
I was very good in math growing up until I got to calculus.
Yeah.
I like math when there's more to it than just do the Pythagorean theorem like this.
I mean, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, I sometimes can impress people because I have the quadratic formula memorized. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All I've got of pi is 3.14159. My daughter had to memorize a lot of digits for LEAP a couple years ago. She got pretty deep into it. How far can you go with the digits of pi?
I can actually do pretty decently on pi.
Okay, go.
All right. I mean, do you have it in front of you?
I got it ready. Go.
I'll close my eyes so, I'm not looking at anything. 3.1415926535897. This is the hard part. 846264.
Nope. You were right up until 8979.
8979. I'm fine. Sorry, I got to the hard part wasn't there. I'm gonna do it one more time.
Okay.
3.14159265358979323383279.
Yes, that's all right.
Okay, very good. All right, that's as far as I can go.
That's impressive. So let's get into the movie Pi, which is about Max Cohen, a reclusive mathematician in New York City who is consumed by his quest to find patterns everywhere. He believes there is mathematical order to the universe, which includes the stock market. Max experiences intense headaches and hallucinations, blurring the line between genius and insanity. Max discovers a number with 216 digits that he thinks is important, but his mentor Saul begs him to stop looking into it. A Wall Street firm wants to use the 216-digit number to control the stock market, and a group of Hasidic Jews believes that the number reveals the true name of God, which can usher in a new messianic age. As his headaches become too much to handle, Max drills into his own brain, which destroys his mathematical skills, but gives him peace. So this movie was made on a shoestring budget. I'm guessing that it probably did end up becoming profitable because they spent so little making it. I mean, even if it didn't do gangbusters numbers, it probably had to turn a profit, right?
Oh, it had a fantastic profit.
Okay.
The budget I've seen anywhere from 60,000 to about double that, like 130, 140,000. That might include marketing as well. And it wound up being $3.2 million at the box office.
Wow.
I remember it being out. I didn't see it in the theaters, but it's a provocative title, and it's spelled the symbol pi.
When I post this episode, I am going to title it with the Greek letter pi.
Yeah, I think it was a very smart idea of the producers of this film, or the writer of the film, or I guess ultimately maybe the producers choose it, but to not have called this PI. I remember like being like, that's a cool title, and it was getting a lot of good reviews. It got a lot of buzz back then.
Yeah, and you had seen it before?
I'd seen it once before, but I'll tell you, I actually did not remember that this was a black and white film.
I saw it once before at the house of a guy you and I both know, Dave. I won't say his last name, but what I remember is that Dave was an asshole, and we watched it on a small TV, and he put himself right in front of the TV, and so everyone else was kind of looking at the back of Dave's head and the TV, so it was kind of hard to see, so I didn't really fully get the experience of watching the movie. So I was excited to watch it again. And it's not just that it's in black and white. It's done on reversal without getting too technical. It's not like normal film where you develop the negative. You're kind of filming on the positive. So it's really grainy. Like I watched it on a DVD the other day on my 720p TV. So it was probably grainier than it would have been if I'd watched it, like on 4K or something like that. But I would imagine that even in 4K, it's still going to look grainy and kind of crappy. It was shot in black and white because it was cheaper. And this is Darren Aronofsky's directorial debut. He wrote the movie. It was financed by him begging people for money. He asked friends and family for $100. Anyone who gave him $100 once the movie became a success, they got $150 back. It's also like filmed guerrilla style, meaning that they filmed it in New York City and got no permits, which you are not supposed to do. People do it. People get away with it. There's a lot of shots in this movie of subway platforms that are empty. I have to assume they were filming at, 3 a.m. or something to be able to get those locations empty because there's always someone there.
I guess they kind of look the other way when it's like an indie film, but you get the wrong cop, he'll shut that down, you're right.
Oh, sure.
Certainly if you're making any disruptions and telling people to get out of your shot or something.
Oh, yeah. No, you can't do that. I've been listening to the Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast. They talk about how they filmed a lot of the early digital shorts kind of the same way, where they would just take a camera and go somewhere and film, and hopefully no one came. And I think it was maybe Dick in a Box where they were saying that cops did show up and they just happened to have some beer and they just gave the cops some beer and the cops were cool and let them keep filming. It's a crapshoot. They can shut you down. You can get in trouble for doing that. You are supposed to get these permits. But yeah, it worked out pretty well for Aronofsky because it seems like he got all the shots that he needed to.
Absolutely. And then, this was the film that launched him to bigger and bigger projects. And have you ever seen any of his other films, Al?
I've seen The Wrestler and Black Swan. I think that's it.
I've seen Noah and I saw The Wrestler.
Okay. As we were talking earlier about how big of math nerds we are, there is some stuff in this movie that I did know. The Fibonacci sequence and that spiral that's everywhere in nature. I remember seeing that, I think in high school, like in the textbook of the spiral in a snail shell is the same as a spiral in a hurricane, and it's the same as the solar system and stuff. And so the fact that Max, who is a mathematical genius, is, having this stuff explained to him and not maybe explaining it to someone else, I thought was a little weird. Like, shouldn't he know this shit?
Some of these people are ignorant on certain areas. But I know the Fibonacci sequence, but it's the kind of stuff that pops up on Reddit more because like someone's like hairdo will be perfect, or even like Conan O'Brien's pompadour one day is like a perfect Fibonacci sequence. So it's become kind of like a meme.
The spiral pattern that's everywhere, I think that is great for this movie because it's visual. And the thing about math is that it's not really visual. And I think the movie does a good job of showing Max's eyes, darting back and forth as he's looking at the stock tickers and stuff like that. And there's the voiceover, so we understand what he's thinking. And, I won't even bitch about the voiceover because in a movie like this, you kind of do need it. It's such an insular story. But it did a little bit make me think of Danica McKellar, Winnie Cooper from The Wonder Years, who after that show, she became a mathematician. She wrote a lot of books, and I think she developed her own theorem or something. But when I was producing Brink on Science Channel hired her to contribute segments to our show about math. I was all excited when they hired her. I'm like, yay, I get to meet Winnie Cooper. And she came by the studio once and it was really cool. But like making a segment on math visually interesting was hard. And I'm talking about 2 to 3 minute segments. Doing it for an entire movie is challenging. And I'm not saying that Aronofsky does a bad job, but I feel like choosing to do a movie about math and numbers, you're giving yourself a challenge, like right out of the gate.
I found the math to be minimal, but I don't think you really needed to follow it. So I have some experience with gematria, the stuff that they were talking about, where all these Hebrew letters corresponds to a number, like A equals 1, B equals 2, and then you add up stuff, and there's some interesting things that happen. I don't put too much stock into that because did you ever hear about this fad from the late 90s? It was a big book called the Bible Code.
No.
Well, someone had basically taken the entire Hebrew Torah and they put it as a single sequence. They used computers to make all these kind of geometrical graphs of wrapping those numbers into Fibonacci sequences and then spheres and all these things. And they would find that as they did certain ones, all these letters would line up, like, and there was a lot of talk about this, like, oh, wow, we've unlocked it. They call it the Bible Code. And it's a secret that was waiting thousands of years until humans that developed computers, because you can't possibly do this with just pen and paper. And then someone came out with the Moby Dick codes. They were able to also find all these insane patterns by doing the same thing. So it's like it became one of those a million monkeys typing at a million typewriters rather. Eventually you get Hamlet. So some people believe in gematria. I've always kind of it's just a little bit interesting sometimes when you see like a little codes, but they touched on it in this film. But you know what part of this film was so realistic and absolutely stands the test of time?
What's that?
And I will say this because we are Jewish, but back me up on this, Al. That is Orthodox Jewish men going up to you in random places, usually in New York City, but it could be random airports, and they'll just go up to you and go, "Are you Jewish?" And then they want to give you those little prayer shawls and prayer accessories that they use. And they know. They got the Jewdar, and they know. So, I mean, has that ever happened to you, Al?
Yes, it's happened to me. Yes, you are right. Yes, we can say this as Jews. Also, though, in the context of the movie, I don't think we are meant to believe that the guy who just approaches Max in the deli and says, "Hey, are you Jewish? Let me tell you about gematria and everything." That's not a coincidence. Like, he knows who Max is, and he is trying to get him to figure out this 216-digit code somehow. Somehow they know, and it is not just happenstance. Although maybe you could interpret it the other way that, hey, everything in the world happens according to some pattern, and this is some mathematical formula that brought these two people together. I don't know. I thought that it was deliberate.
I'm not so sure. I would not put it past if I were in a situation like that, where I just struck up a conversation with someone and he figured out I was Jewish, that he might say, "Hey, why don't you come to a Friday night dinner at my house? We have 12 people over. Yeah, come over." It's like a thing that would be normal. And I could see them getting into this because he said he studies numbers, and then he's like, "Oh, have you ever heard of gematria?" And I could see it happening, but I didn't even, I'll tell you, Al, I did not even think that he knew who he was and he was trying to seek him out. That's fascinating. I really did not even consider that in the film. You might be absolutely right. I don't think it's obvious because I didn't think that.
Yeah, and I think that it is ambiguous, and this movie does have a unreliable narrator. Max is hallucinating. When he was 6 years old, he stared into the sun because his mom told him not to. And he gets these horrible, horrible headaches. And he has these visions of, people are following him. He is under surveillance. And then when he's talking to Marcy, who's the woman at the Wall Street firm who's trying to get a hold of him, he says, I'll work with you, but I have some demands. First thing, you call off the surveillance. And she says, done. And I was thinking when she said that, is she surveilling him? Is that real? Or is she just playing along with this guy who's fucking paranoid? And he says, you better call off the surveillance. And she's thinking, yeah, sure, I can do that easily, instantly, because there is no one surveilling you. And we don't know. He sees people that are following him. But one time it's just a guy taking pictures for like a photography class or something. And then there's a whole chase scene. But is that real? Because he also, finds a random brain on the subway platform. So we don't know what's real and what isn't. And it is ambiguous. Maybe he's under surveillance. Maybe he isn't. Maybe that guy, Lenny is his name, the other Jewish character. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. We don't know, and there's really no way to know. And I think that is very much by design. I think you just kind of have to be along for the ride, and whatever interpretation you have, sure, why not? Like there's no right or wrong, I don't think.
I want to talk about one other character, Saul, the mentor. He's the older gentleman who's, he said, I'd seen this 216 digit pattern. I thought that was very cool.
Yeah.
That actor that portrayed Saul was the late Mark Margolis. He's probably now mostly well known for his role in the Better Call Saul Breaking Bad series.
Hector Salamanca.
Yeah, he was the man with the bell. Such a good actor that he spent probably half of his time in those two series not speaking a word and only using his index finger and breathing heavily or not breathing heavily. Like, what a great acting job. So I was happy to see him pop up in this film.
As Hector Salamanca and Saul, those are both characters that he played who suffered from a stroke, for whatever that's worth. When he's talking about when he first saw the 216-digit number, he says that it was because there was just some bug in the software and, the code is nothing. That made me think about the ants, because you see a lot of the ants in Max's computer setup that he has. And I was like, oh, the bug in the software, it's a bug, like a literal bug, the ants. I was also thinking about the ants in terms of like the unreliable narrator thing. Like, are the ants helping him? Are the ants supposed to be his friends who are giving him this code? Like that phrase, it's not a bug, it's a feature, that maybe the bug in the software is what's giving him the correct code. I'm not sure that it's right. I think probably the more accurate thing is that the ants represent Max, because for the ant that's crawling on the computer chip, it doesn't understand what a computer chip is. It's just a thing that it crawls on. It's its home or where it lays eggs or whatever. Do ants lay eggs? I don't know. But in the same way that Max doesn't understand what this number is. He has it. He thinks he knows what it means, but he doesn't fucking comprehend it. This is something that is so much bigger than him.
Yeah, and I actually kind of like how the film doesn't really go into the math about what this 216-digit code does, because it opened up a question that's interesting, and it kind of closed it when Max, at the end, he's going crazy, and he winds up doing a medical procedure. It's one of the most ancient procedures that we have as humans, trepanation. And that's when you drill a hole in your head. It's still done today in very rare cases. But there are cavemen skulls with holes in their head that are definitely chipped out, and it's trepanation, and they would probably get rid of evil spirits or something like that. But it was most likely a big tumor.
I mean, a caveman needs that like they need a hole in the head.
I see what you did there. But fun fact, that's why babies have that soft spot called the anterior fontanelle in the front, because just in case they get like a little brain swelling, like meningitis or some kind of brain thing, there's a little bit of stretching room in that infant brain.
Right. Even that scene, I think, is also a question. Does he really drill into his own head? Or is that a hallucination? I think the movie is implying that it is a thing that he really does, because then there's that last scene where the little girl who had been asking him to do all these math problems in his head before, it always annoyed him. This time he doesn't mind when she comes over and asks him a math problem, and he is delighted to say, I don't know. He has cured himself of this affliction, this gift, both, whatever it is. So I think you're supposed to believe that he really did drill into his head. I would have to think, though, just taking a drill, putting it into your skull, the odds of survival, I mean, bringing it to math, right? Like, what are the odds that you're just going to be fine and you're not going to seriously damage yourself or your brain or your cognitive functions?
Presuming you don't drill into the brain, I mean, it's just a skull. I mean, there is a little bit of space there. And, people crack their skulls all the time. And in this guy's case, he did lose a little bit of function. So maybe he did drill the drill went in, a centimeter too far. But it did change him. Again, you bring up a lot of interesting things. This is kind of Total Recall-esque where, is it a dream? Is it not a dream? There's some evidence both ways. Why can't he do the math at the end? Or was this some kind of what they call like conversion syndrome? I think it's conversion syndrome. He probably deep down maybe still has the ability to do all these math problems, but he's achieved some peace and now he doesn't need that. And even if it's still there, it's hard to say. It doesn't answer those questions really, but it doesn't necessarily need to. He seems to be a little bit happier.
Yeah, I think a lot happier. And also that math question that the girl asks him at the end of the movie is what's 748 divided by 238, which apparently is not exactly pi, but it brings you pretty close to 3.14. Just one last pi reference as the movie ends. And honestly, there's not a ton of pi in the movie. Like the circle pi. He talks about it for a little bit in the movie, but that's not like what the 216 digit number, which is, I guess, kind of the MacGuffin of the movie, that's not pi related.
I mean, it's a pattern within pi. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a sequence. Maybe it's kind of by, again, wrapping the pi digit three-dimensionally or something in a computer, but there's something that came out of pi.
Interesting. But let me ask you, James, what do you think about pi, the movie? Not the digit, not the letter, not the dessert, but the movie Pi. Do you think it stands the test of time?
I was actually surprised I was not bored with this film. I had only seen it once, and I remember thinking, like, I don't really need to see this film again, but I didn't dislike it the first time. I actually think I liked it a little bit more the second time I saw it. It's a quick film. I think that does it a lot of credit. I think it could have easily been a half hour longer. There's some subplots that, I'm glad they didn't go too much into who these weird agents were. And it is what it is. And the movie ended very shortly after the climax, which I kind of thought there might be a whole other act about what happens after this, but it doesn't. And it's not an uplifting film, but it's also not a depressing film. It really moves along well enough that I was intrigued by it. I thought it touched on some mathematical stuff without, like I said, getting too much into it. Yeah, for me, actually, I think that the movie does stand the test of time. I did find it interesting. It does definitely have its flaws, and I enjoyed those 90-ish minutes. So, yeah, stands the test of time. What do you think, Al?
Watching it now, the one thing that kind of leapt out at me from a test of time perspective was that if they made this movie today, they would be talking a lot about AI, right? Like that would be the thing that Max is working on, is he needs to develop an AI that can crack the code, can find the pattern, can deliver the 216 digit number. But at the same time, I feel like that's a very small difference, because in the movie, he's building a computer program that's doing all of those things. They just don't call it AI. Like, he's still using the program and he's programming it and depending on the computer. So it's not terribly different from AI, right? Like, you'd still have to develop the bot, give the bot the right data set, and give it the right prompts. So it would still be a man who's a genius working with next level technology, whether you call it AI or not. So I don't think that really gets in the way of the movie standing the test of time. I think that the movie does employ a lot of, I don't love this word, but tricks, where it is trying to make this movie about math feel really exciting. So it has to rely on the voiceover, the black and white footage, the grainy footage, the very, very manic handy cam stuff where it's really jittery and it's sometimes hard to follow. Like you don't really know exactly what's going on, which works for the movie because you are in the head of this man who is losing his grip on reality. So the fact that you are disoriented watching it is deliberate, like you're in his shoes. So it works, but I felt like I could see the reasons behind the decisions that I was watching in the movie in a way that you're not supposed to. Like if you're watching a movie and it's fully engrossing, you forget that you're watching a movie. You're just in it for the story. I could see kind of the seams in this movie, but I still did find it entertaining. I really just wanted to know what was going to happen because I really didn't remember the ending, and I was invested in Max. I didn't really care about him cracking the stock market. I didn't actually think he was going to usher in a new age of the Messiah, but I thought that these ideas were interesting enough and compelling enough, and the acting was good enough that I was hooked. So yeah, I will say that the movie Pi stands the test of time. It is also worth noting that pi, the number, has stood the test of time. It is a constant. So by actual definition.
Oh my God.
Come on, that's a little funny. A little funny. No.
I mean, it's a math joke, sure. Yeah.
It's like a dad math joke. This is totally random. When I worked at an ad agency, one of our clients was Spotify, and we would post things for the random holidays. Guess what we did for Pi Day?
You baked pies?
No, this is for the social media accounts for Spotify. Like a Twitter post to get people to listen to Spotify on Pi Day.
The quickest one I'd think of would be play 24 hours of just songs with pie. American Pie, She's My Cherry Pie. I mean, there's not that many, but I would, then you just put them on a loop.
So that was our first idea. And I didn't like that idea because I thought it was too obvious.
Okay.
And what we did was we created a whole playlist of songs that at first glance had absolutely nothing in common. They have nothing to do with pie, no American Pie, no cherry pie. The thing was that all of the songs were 3 minutes and 14 seconds. It required just a little bit of patience to get the joke, but I thought it was very clever. I don't know if anyone else ever did, but I made myself laugh.
I can see it making you laugh, Al. Yeah, I can see it.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the original animated movie from 1937, because there's a new live-action movie coming out. So, yeah, it seems like the perfect reason to talk about the very first full-length Disney animated feature.
I mean, the thing that made everything we know about Disney what it is today was the success of this film. Not Steamboat Willie, it's this film.
Exactly. So in the meantime, write to us. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Let us know your thoughts about pi and Fibonacci sequences and the quadratic formula and any other nerdy math thing you want to talk to us about. If we don't know what it is, we'll just admit that you're smarter than us, and that's cool. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
I think you meant to say pie.